is a debate within the plant-based community, vegans and vegetarians, around the idea of making plant-based foods taste like meat. Many will say that simulating the taste of meat goes against the ethos of eating a meat-free diet. But there is the opposing argument that to get meat eaters to switch to plant-based, you need to offer something that appeals to them, something meaty. At Juicy Marbles, not only are they simulating meat, but in their new ribs offering, they also make the simulated bones edible. I speak to Vladimir Mickovic about bones and brands, the future of cultivated meat and plant-based food, misinformation and sustainability, algorithms, and much, much more. I'm Alex Crisp, and welcome to the Future of Foods interviews. So, nice to meet you, Vladimir. Thank you for agreeing to come on to the Future of Foods podcast. And you are the CEO and founder of Juicy Marbles, which makes plant-based meat alternatives. I
want one correction here. I am not the CEO. No, I'm not the CEO. I am one of the co-founders, but I am the CBO. All these titles. It's the Chief Brand Officer.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Okay, all right. So just to start with, I mean, would I call you Vladimir, or do people call you Vlad?
Vlad is okay.
Vlad is okay. I mean, it has connotations, doesn't it, in the West, Vlad? You know, Vlad the Drac.
The Dracula, the Impaler, the Putin. There's all these Vlad that are Putin, tarnishing the reputation of us other Vladimirs.
There's a lot of great Vladimirs out there. Yes. Okay, so Vladimir, could you just tell us just a little bit about yourself and Juicy Marbles?
What about myself?
Well, how did you become interested in this area? Let's start with that, shall we?
Good question. It's quite random, though. You know, I don't have this inspiring life story where I begin with something that happened in my youth and it was just like, I think it started with selfishness. Like around my 20s, started thinking about diet, improving health, and, optimizing nutrition. And then you start reading some scary stuff about, how certain foods affect the body and also then the planet and stuff like that. And it was like a long, slow learning of nutrition that was part of it. The other thing was just in the Balkans, there's such a passion for food and hosting people, making dinner parties. Just really hosting people at your home and having abundance of food and expressing and socializing with food and stuff like that. So these things were always present in my life. I think in big part because of my mom, because she was always cooking up amazing, diverse foods. So that was kind of the food part. But I started off as a designer, and I worked in communications all my life. And then as I became predominantly plant-based and as my diet has shifted, I started, part of it is that I really didn't agree as in how brands are communicating to a wider audience. And I saw that there is a lot of room for improvement and empathy and inclusion there. And the other part was I really started disliking client work because I used to have a design studio, still active, but I'm not active in it. And I didn't like the nature of these like quick projects for random clients that just kept happening. So I felt like I would love to surround myself with people that I enjoy being with and share the same, or let's say similar values. And also I was very, very interested in creating a plant-based brand that wasn't so plant-based.
Okay.
If that makes
Okay.
sense. So that was my personal, each founder would probably say their own story as to what got them in there. Some people have a more technical nature and are interested in innovation and microbiology and stuff like that. For me, a big part of it was how does the brand express itself?
Okay. So you say that you were a designer. Is that a clothes designer or a brand designer?
No, 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 no. I studied graphic design, and then that just evolved into the broader language of branding. So if we say branding, the definition of branding being a brand is not what you say it is, it's what other people think of you.
Yeah.
There's so many disciplines that go into that, but I think what I've learned the most was all things visual, like illustration, design, and copywriting. Those are the 2, 3 skills that I worked in the past with most.
Okay.
Also a lot of communication strategies and stuff like that. But yeah, I've been kind of furthering myself from just those disciplines. I'm just interested in the whole branding sphere as to like how to, it's interesting in plant-based is because you're going against the cultural grain and there's so much tribalism. So a big part of why people are dismissing plant-based foods before they even try plant-based food is because nobody wants to exit the coolest, biggest club on earth. And that is a very interesting aspect to me personally to think about and try to tackle.
Yeah, I think that is also one of the most interesting things. I mean, I suppose I've become more interested in cultivated meat as a solution to a lot of problems, because I fear that the majority of meat eaters who are part of this kind of cool gang that you talk about will never move. In order to prevent them the increase of meat eating throughout the world kind of causing sort of devastation to various aspects of the planet and animals, in order to stop them eating a burger, you need to hand them a burger that's exactly the same, but perhaps a different source.
There's a lot of theories of course, there's not one single solution, obviously, but yeah, cultivated meat is very interesting. I don't understand completely how they think about scaling this, because anything that I've read seems to hit a dead end in seams of when you think about scaling it, it doesn't seem to show that kind of promise of also sustainability as it should, because you have to have these big bioreactors that, first of all, just building all these stainless steel, pristine, clean factories that require really highly educated, highly trained people to operate is a big challenge. So I consider myself a layman, but I am yet to be, I don't know if the convinced is the right word. I'm yet to understand how they plan on actually, because you need to grow to a certain amount for it to be a viable solution in a relatively short frame of time.
Well, I've spoken to a few people about the scaling up. One of the interviews I don't know if you've heard it, but with someone from Meat. Her name is Marie Gibbons, and she talked about scaling up. And it's not so much the building of the bioreactors, it's more about producing the kind of nutrients that will be required to feed the bioreactors. That would be the hurdle.
That's one thing, yeah. The nutrients are allegedly hard to get or expensive, but then there's also the fact that if you want to, let's say, take a reactor from 1x to 10x, it doesn't necessarily yield 10x product because of how this serum functions. And this is where I'm really going out of my area of expertise, but there's quite some challenges. But I'm not saying this as like I'm not supportive. I'm supportive of all these things, and I'm super excited about trying the first cultivated piece of meat.
Yes.
Any day.
Well, it's all very exciting, and let's get back to your expertise. So, I got the question. I get the question here. Why did you call yourself Juicy Marbles? But I kind of already understand why you called yourself that. I mean, it's sort of.
You do? I would love to hear your interpretation.
Well, in your picture, you have in your brand, you have a picture of the Earth, and obviously the Earth looks like a marble. Mm-hmm. From a distance, and also your product, I imagine that when you eat it, it has a bit of a crunch to it, so it's like having a juicy bit of marble in your meat. So so that's what I got from your name, and I put them both together, and I kind of thought which came first, but why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me?
Yeah, see, this is the beauty of branding, because you're right, and this is interpretation you have, and this is how you interpret this brand, and that is absolutely true, because that's what you got from it. And I love that you got that from it, because there was definitely post naming Juicy Marbles. It came together that it's all of these things. However, the conception of the name is much more anticlimactic, or let's say less conceptual. There's less grandeur in the concept, because ultimately we were just collecting words as we were starting and playing with different names. At some point we were named Chunky Thoughts. It was just, we just used a different name for a week, and then we started using a different name and just seeing how it feels. And then in the end, one of the compositions of words that we liked, Juicy Marbles, just kind of rolled off the tongue, and we felt good about it. And we knew immediately this is the one, because it felt good saying it, we were playing it. And then of course, the marble also being the head and the brain, or, like you're losing your marbles. And so there's all of these connotations that we like. But ultimately, it was once we started saying it in regards to us that we were like, this feels right. This is our name.
Well, it's very visual, isn't it? Which, you as a brand guy, you'd recognize that. And also, I suppose you need to kind of look at if the web page is still available, if the URL is still there. So kind of, if you find two words and stick them together where no one stuck those words together before, you have a better.
It is true. That is one of the funny realities of business these days, that a lot of names that you want to give your company, you're like, there's now the .com domain is taken by somebody. Yeah. And it's usually just people who just buy domains to have them because they know that they might be valuable someday, which is an interesting behavior. But that's luckily we did not have problems with Juicy Marbles, except I think it was either Twitter or one platform. We still don't have the exact at Juicy Marbles. It's like with a little line underneath or something like that, because there's two teenagers that were reviewing video games for like 3 months or something. They called themselves Juicy Marbles, but then I guess they left that juvenile project behind. But we couldn't get to them. We were like trying to message them, and we wanted to offer them, some symbolic money to give us the domain, but they probably just never checked that profile again.
Okay, well, maybe we should do a shout out to them on this podcast. If we can call out for them to contact you.
It was very obscure. You could just see it was two teenagers, and the name was just, you couldn't really discern who it was. Of course, these platforms cannot give away identities, so we were like, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It was like, we got the .com domain. You can see Juicy Marbles written on all of our profiles, so it was like not a big deal.
Okay, well, you probably need to hire an investigator to go and find them. And
yeah, one day when we can afford it, we're going to hire a private detective to find those kids and give us our name.
Rough them up. Okay, so I know a little bit about your products. Why don't you tell us about your latest loin cuts? Is that right?
Well, our latest, actually, now we just released the rib. So let me just give a little timeline here. So we started 2.5, 3 years ago-ish, and we have raised seed capital for our first product, which was what we like to call the world's first marbled plant-based steak. So that was, we took the shape of a filet mignon, and we kind of used that to get a little buzz. And that was kind of the logical next step in the plant-based industry, like who's gonna do something that's similar to a steak. That was our first product. So we developed technology that enables us to recreate like whole cuts, complicated big whole cuts. So then naturally the next thing that we did is that we took I don't know how to call this, the mother of the fillet, which is the whole tenderloin, just used the tender and just called it the loin. So that was our second product, which we introduced last year. And that was, I feel, more on brand than the first one, just in the sense is that what I was talking earlier, hosting, making a plethora of recipes, and just, having a lot of variety in what you can do with a piece of meat. And that's what we wanted to recreate. And, a steak is very suggestive as to just, sizzle me and I will be a steak. While a big slab of meat, you can cut in all sorts of ways. So we wanted to give to anybody who is dabbling in protein diversity, a tool, that enables them to do whatever they want. So that was a year ago. And after that, our latest product is also, this sparked a little controversy, was ribs with actual bones, which also we made edible, which was part of the outrage of many people online. But yeah, we just actually made the first, because we used to begin launching these products with smaller drops just to get feedback and improve, and then bigger drops. So now we did the same with the ribs. We just made the first drop of 1,000 pieces, and now we're going to move on to bigger ones after we get a little feedback.
I mean, this is, I guess this is the interesting part of your company, isn't it? It's that your products are look like meat. They are, when you look at them in their packaging, it looks like you are buying a steak. It looks like you are buying a loin of meat or ribs, and the description of them with the edible bones, which it is supposed to, kind of fashion itself on meat. So you say it's raised some controversy. What sort of comments have you received?
Well, generally there is still there's this classic opinion in I would say in popular opinion, which is like, why even imitate meat? That's just, even without the edible bones and everything, this is a constant. Whenever meat gets a little realistic, there is a lot of backlash. Just the concept of something imitating meat seems to be rubbing people wrong. It's kind of like appropriating somebody's culture. It's hard to understand. I think it's just a convenient first response to I don't think there's a lot of understanding, because often I see this phrase. Here it goes. Like, I don't understand why vegans who hate meat so much want to eat something that looks like meat. And the beginning is the most interesting part to me. It's like, I don't understand. And to that person, I would ask, did you try to understand? Because it's not that hard to understand. I would also feel uncomfortable asking, did you try to understand? Because I don't want to be condescending to anybody, but that is ultimately, that is the question. Because if you have a conversation with anybody, a vegan or somebody who's just cutting down on meat, almost everybody has spent majority of their life being raised on meat and just loved the flavor, the texture, the sensory experience of meat is awesome. There's no denying that. And it just makes sense. Like, okay, so if raising beef is not just a environmental disaster, but a humanitarian disaster, then maybe let's make something that's similar in the sensory experience and try to slowly shift away. It's not like a big deal. It's like that's why it's so funny to me. It's so tribal. It's like just you can try it. If you don't like it, you don't have to really eat it.
Yeah. It seems like you are creating a product that sort of bridges the gap between vegetarianism and meat eating. So it's you get the feeling that it's for meat eaters, really, isn't it? Perhaps it's not for vegetarians or vegans. Perhaps.
I personally like to say it's for anybody who likes that sensory experience. But yeah, like I would say that again, most people have started their life as a meat eater. So it's a experience that you grow to like, and we all know why. It's great. It's juicy. It's easy to make. You don't have to do much. A little sprinkle of salt, put it on a pan, and you have a amazing source of protein, right? A lot of energy, good flavors. It's an enjoyable experience. So why? It's because it's a good experience, and if you want something that's I don't want to go into ethics, right? There are plenty of reasons, even selfish ones, that why one should perhaps dabble in protein diversity. But a topic that is rarely mentioned is based. It's the one that I talked earlier briefly. Is then humanitarian issue, right? So it takes 80% of food that we grow from Earth, we feed to livestock. 80% of our grown food goes to livestock. In return, we get 17% of worldwide calories.
Yeah.
Even worse, beef is 60% versus 2% of calories. So very inefficient in feeding humans on this scale where we are now. And we now have 1.9 billion people, over 1.9 billion people who don't have food security, and about 800 million people who are malnourished. And we could solve that already now by a different distribution of the food system. And it pains me that that's not almost the central subject, because maybe that would be something that people consider, because I do understand it's hard to empathize with a different species. It's hard to even empathize with a different tribe of people, with somebody who seems different. It really, like, empathy is very spotlightish, right? It works to similar people to us. So it's not hard for me to understand why people have trouble empathizing with animals. It is difficult, especially to hold that viscerally in your head, because I've had a lot of friends come to me and say, man, yesterday I watched this documentary, I'm never eating meat again. 3 days later, they're back on the meat wagon. And I'm not saying that judgmentally, but it's just like you can't live by forcing this thought into your head and reprogramming yourself. It takes a lot of devotion to say, I'm going to reprogram myself to feel empathy for this creature that I don't see every day. I don't hear, I don't know. It's difficult.
Yes, it's difficult. I think that's the point, isn't it? It's kind of difficult for people to stop eating meat, because they kind of think being a vegetarian is complicated. They kind of think it's going to sort of take a lot, kind of a lot of changes to their life and to their
it will.
And
they're right.
Well,
it is hard. I want to say that it is hard. It is hard because a lot of eating, it's easy to switch your diet at home, but a lot of eating is social. And I struggle with restaurants because the offering of plant-based foods in restaurants is usually that 1 or 2 dishes that the chef reluctantly made because there is a trend, Yeah. So it is harder because sometimes you don't want to eat that risotto that every restaurant has for the vegans, or or a plant-based burger, right? Because that was, when plant-based burgers became realistic, that was the go-to solution for restaurants to cater to plant-based needs. But like, you don't always want a burger. There's so much creativity in food that needs to be addressed. So it is hard because we're not talking about a simple dietary change. We're talking about a cultural shift, and it will take time. Like 10 years ago, they were like 10, 15 years, the world will be vegan. And I'm like thinking, in what reality? In what reality does such a overhaul of society happen in such a short time? Unless, of course, the ozone was already burning or something, and then maybe. But I don't. It's very, very complicated. I've been, studying this for a decade and over, and I'm still beginning to grasp of how intricate such a change would be. So I totally get it why it's hard, and that's why I think, like, we need to just keep going at it and have a lot. Juicy marbles is one solution. It's like we make, let's say, realistic-ish steaks. I think in 10, 20 years, we're going to look at this and say this was the Minecraft of meat in some regards. It's not like an exact replica, but let's say in a lot of the sensory aspects, it's almost there. Whatever, doesn't matter. Sorry, I was like, what was I saying already?
So yeah, I mean, we're talking. I mean, it's kind of a generational thing, perhaps, isn't it? It's we are at a strange inflection point in our history, in that there are an awful lot of people of a certain age that have held on to beliefs that they've had for kind of 60, 70 years, but there is a kind of bubbling of the youth that's there's a much higher percentage of vegetarians and vegans in the kind of Generation Z. So the
question is, should we be promoting veganism, or should we be promoting sensible eating, or I don't know what the phrase would be, because I think people, when you tell them go vegan, they see it as a tribal invite. So I think you cannot present the most extreme form of personality, identity, tribal change and advertise that, and then think that people are going to be, yeah, sure. It's far out. Yeah. I'm not saying I don't agree with, I think most people agree with the principles of veganism, right? Nobody wants harm, all that. It's totally agreeable.
Yeah.
But in its purest form, it is very unattainable. So an invitation to that is very hard to accept, I think, for a lot of people. So that's why I'm wondering, like, what is this softer approach that leads to people maybe thinking 80-20, 90-10? I don't know, like just maybe eat mostly plant-based, but don't constrain yourself. Because I do think gradual change is going to happen. Anybody who thinks that people are just going to go 0-1, I have trouble talking to those people because I don't think we have the same understanding of reality, because it's in an ideal world maybe, but it's a lot to ask of society that has also, when we talk about this change that is necessary, it took me a long time to research things, to find, how do I find tasty recipes? It took me a while, and I consider myself being a privileged person to have so much time to research, to eat a solid plant-based nurturing diet that maintains my health. It takes a second, right? And I think a lot of people don't think that maybe a lot of people are struggling socioeconomically or otherwise, or even just emotionally in this world. And it's a hard ask also because of that. So there's all these factors, it's like, when you're working week to week and you have like a couple of children to feed, you're not going to take time to explore new recipes and diets. Yeah. You're going to go for the cheap sources of protein and carbs, and that's it.
You're going to eat what you're used to, I suppose, aren't you? Because it's comfortable for you. But also, I suppose it's sort of dealing with the media landscape, isn't it? Because I spoke to the CEO at Compassion in World Farming, Philip Limbury, and he described cultivated meat, for example, as the renewable energy of equivalent, and there is and that because of that, I suppose it's going to face a sort of media backlash. There's going to be a lot of kind of sort of some misinformation about the effects of animal farming and the rest of it. And I mean, a relative of mine a few weeks ago kind of told me that he read somewhere on Facebook that kind of veganism is worse for the planet than kind of meat eating. So, this information is out there, and it's being spread around, and people who read it believe it, like they will believe what they're told. So
yeah, because you're looking for stuff that's going to fortify your worldview, and there's a lot of potent messages about veganism. And the classical strategy, it's like Vincent's cigarettes and then petroleum. It's not debunk the theory. It's like add doubt as to that theory being valid.
That's right.
So it's like, all these articles about nutrients and vegans who are weak and all of that, and you easily believe it because you want to believe it, and it sounds plausible. I also had a conversation about climate change with a couple of older Republicans, and it was a great conversation, all in all, like with them, and it wasn't a divisive tone at all. But we did steer away from actually diving deeper because they nailed me with an argument that I knew I don't even want to go into. And they asked me, because they don't believe that humans are causing climate change. So they just asked me a question, which was a perfect summary, which you cannot argue with. So the question was the following: do you think we are bigger than nature? So there's a lot of implications. And then if you answer, yeah, I don't think we are, it's over, right? So there's a lot of these very simple explanations that are really, they do sound logical. They feel comfortable believing in.
Yeah.
That are just flowing around as little bits of, let's say, misinformation or just questions of doubt that reinforce old worldviews and prevent people from being like, maybe I should consider this new notion.
It sort of boils down to what people want to believe. If people want to believe, I mean, I've flown over. I mean, if you've ever flown into sort of South America or into anywhere or into Southeast Asia, and as your plane is coming into land, you can see a mile of plastic up against the beach, and you can't deny that you've seen that because it's there, and people must know. People must know that there is a lot of plastic in the world. They must know that there are things that kind of take some attention, but but yes, it's a kind of acceptable worldview that they don't want to that they don't want to rock it. They just want it to stay the same. They want everything to stay as it is. But anyway, I think we're getting off the subject a little bit. You were right. I'd like to talk about the branding actually of Juicy Marbles. I've been looking for someone to kind of talk to about being better, with the plant-based food and cultivated meat, putting forward the corrective narrative. What is it? I mean, you talked about kind of creating a cool gang that people want to be in. And is that really kind of what you're going for in your branding, perhaps?
I think that there's a lot of different trains of thought that sometimes are hard to discern, but they all influence. But I would say a lot of it was wanting to not take ourselves too seriously. So I think this definition of comedy, I really like. What was his name already? I can't remember it right now, but it's like comedy is the art of telling the truth about what it's like to be human. Yeah, there's something very true about that. And, comedy alleviates the pain of existence. And comedy can look at society very critically, very, very critically, but still see the beauty in it and forgive it, right? So I think this boldness and how we express ourselves as a brand comes from this just desire to not necessarily just add unnecessary seriousness to life in general, because in the end we're just people who are doing business, and we go to the office and we are hanging out with each other, and doing a brand like this is much more fun for us, and I think also for people who are experiencing it. But again, you start with how you want to work and how you want to approach things. And I part of what I didn't like about client work was just this worship of seriousness as some kind of ultimate goal of human existence. And I think a lot of it is just trying to be easygoing about that. And I think when you look at the world and how much division there is, I feel like there should be some voices that find middle ground and be able to look at both sides and laugh. Like we're often also critical of vegans, and or let's say we like to look at this through both lenses, right? So compassionate also towards people who are meat eaters, not in a condescending sense, but understanding that it's a hard journey, and then also understanding the vegan aspect, which is why I guess we're making up such a product, right? So where is this in between ground? And that's again like connecting the tribes, and all of these things seem like very lofty goals, but I'm sure there is that that is a North Star that is guiding us, and there's a lot to be discovered in how to actually do that. But the beginning was definitely rooted in comedy, in this definition of comedy that I just told you.
So what have you found? I mean, have you found many obstacles with your product at all? I mean, what's the uptake? Is it it's on the market now, clearly. What's the uptake like?
The market has actually been responding really nicely. I think the biggest challenge is figuring out how to go to market and optimizing production, these kind of mooring back-end stuff of business, and figuring out processes. When you're a company of 10 people, it's one thing, and then it's 15 people, it's a new thing. So it's a lot of that. And then, none of us have ever launched a CPG brand. So we are just in the void, figuring out. And each of these, either food service, distributors, retailers, it's all new. And there are these societies or tribes, they function in different ways than we think they do. And there's a lot of assumptions that we make that need to be dismantled. And I think that is the biggest challenge. I think there's always going to be a market for products. When you think about the supermarket, there's just so much crap. And that was always kind of a comforting thought to me. It's like, look at all this absolute garbage pretending to be food, which is killing it out there. So I'm not trying to diss on our product, but I think, the bar is very low. So I don't think going to market is such a problem as it is figuring out how to do business in a healthy way that doesn't destroy you, and that, has good margins and all that. I think that's definitely the biggest challenge.
So your product, it is a plant-based alternative meat, but I mean, would you say it's a healthy product?
I would. I usually refrain calling any food healthy, because, let's say kale is healthy. You're not going to live on kale alone. You need a diverse diet. That's why I don't like this healthy foods paradigm at all. You have to have a diverse diet. Our product is full of micronutrients and macronutrients that your body needs. And we're only going to add more in the future and really make a full package. Don't want to go too much into that, but it is absolutely totally fine to eat. You can eat it a lot even. There is nothing harmful in there. But I would not recommend to eat any food every day. I would recommend to any person to think about diet sensibly, try to eat as many different colorful foods as possible. And that's why I'm reluctant to say this is a health food, right? But I would be reluctant to say about blueberries, about anything at all, that it's a health food, because that creates this perception of like this product alone can do things that other products cannot, and
yes.
I would urge people
for everybody, you must have a balanced diet.
Absolutely. Right. So, there is no worries about eating our product even often, but please eat as many foods as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how can I don't know whether it's a secret or not, but how do you get the bone effect then in your food?
Oh, you mean so how do we make the bones, the ribs?
Yeah.
It's really it's just made out of dehydrated protein. It's
Okay.
predominantly soy protein that it's fairly easy to make. There's
Okay.
not much more to it. So we just hardened some protein, and there's some ideas that we might flavor it so that you can maybe cook a broth with it, but we'll see how sensible that is at this scale. We also have to see how people respond
Mm.
to bones in the first place.
Okay.
We're going to do a little research and see, like, pardon me, the people even eat them, because we said they're edible. Like you can sizzle them and fry them, and it's like a crispy protein snack. But it is a very novel idea. I acknowledge that it's like weird,
Mm.
and usually people are not very receptive to disruptions to something that is already very well established, such as you eat the meat off the bone and the bone goes away. So this is quite weird, but we were in the last moment, like as we were going through the process of developing ribs and bone, we're like, man, this is protein, let's try and eat it. So we
Mm.
tried it raw, and it was like, nah, no, it's all right, but it's like I wouldn't really recommend it to anybody. But then we fried it a little bit and sizzled it on oil, and it puffed up, and we were like, man, this is not bad at all, like, especially if you throw a little seasoning. Nice. So we said, let's tell people it's edible and see what happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's I mean I heard from I heard from someone that the blood effect for a lot of these dishes is from beetroot. Is that what you use?
We're not doing the blood effect necessarily. I don't know if any brand really is. I think that was more like a niche little marketing by Impossible Foods very early on, because
Right.
I don't see any brand communicating bleeding. And it's also real meat also doesn't actually bleed. There's just juiciness. The
Mm.
beetroot is really just a colorant. It just provides that meaty color without too much of uh, intervention in flavors and sensory
Okay.
behavior of the product. So it's a convenient color.
Okay. But as a final question, I just want to ask you if you have any predictions for the future of plant-based food or cultivated meat. I mean, probably more plant-based food.
I am very reluctant in the realm of predictions. I have hopes.
Okay.
I have hopes.
Okay.
Uh,
What are your hopes?
my hopes are that the narrative changes and that people become a bit more curious in just trying out stuff without the tribal prejudice. I do hope that meat, animal meat, loses its subsidies and has to actually fight off, fight it out in the ring of the free market without the taxpayer aid. I do hope that, because if we stop subsidizing meat with our taxpayer money, it's going to become a ultra premium food immediately. And then a lot of positive change will ensue, because it's already becoming more and more expensive, but it's still ludicrously cheap as to how hard it is to produce it. So I think I hope there will be some legislation that says, you know what, if we're really doing this free market thing, let's actually do it. Let's see how viable animal agriculture really is without billions of subsidies every year. I mean, this is an industry that doesn't even have to turn a profit to turn a profit. It is ridiculous. So that is my hope. But, to make a prediction in that realm,
Yeah.
you know,
There are
very,
a few countries that are heading towards that, aren't there? And Scandinavian countries, I think, are quite forward thinking in their
But are they doing that, or are they giving like a carbon tax? Because I've heard a lot about the carbon tax. I haven't heard a lot about just removing the subsidies from
I don't
an
think they're going to
industry.
remove. I don't think they're removing the subsidies, but they are. But you know, they are encouraging more plant-based food as part of their food program.
I don't think I don't have high hopes for that.
No.
And especially seeing like how people approach communication. So imagine you're like a PR communicator for a governmental institution, and you get a brief to tell people that they should eat more plant-based. And you don't even eat plant-based, maybe, probably. And you've never really delved into the intricacies or considered the intricacies of how hard it is to communicate such a shift to people. And then most likely what will happen, they will take these low-hanging fruits of communication, which are very moralistic. It's usually what happens with these, like they're going to make a cute little slogan, or like meat-free Monday, or these little, it's just very ineffective, I think. And the problem I see with that is you're again shifting the responsibility to the end consumer, to the people. And I do not like that notion. I think this is why we have institutions. And if they have the data and it's clear that everybody wants real change to combat, people are going to get used to it. You remove the subsidies, meat becomes expensive. It's going to take a year, even less. People are going to be fine in a month, because it's just going to be a new reality, and it's going to be communicated. Look, this is what is happening. It's tough, but we have to do tough things right now. But because I guess people in charge, they want to nurture their voters. They don't want to, push any buttons. These flaccid solutions are being proposed. Let's buy all the billboards in a city and like make a white poster with green little leaves and talk about responsibility of each one of us. I am sick of that. I really think that we need institutional change. All these recycle this, put a bottle away, that, it's all these things are like, it's all on us. They're like, we're dealing with enough. You are in charge. You have the data. Implement. We will follow. We have voted for you. We are already there. Just do it.
Yeah. I suppose it's about money for them as well, isn't it? It's about kind of donations. But I mean, now we have, we sort of have Jeff Bezos on the side of, at least on the side of cultivated meat. I hear that he's about to invest like £1 billion in European sort of in European cultivated meat. So more of that kind of money obviously is going to make a big difference, isn't it?
We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. Well, I don't know what $1 billion does.
No, I mean it's certainly a lot more than the 12 million that the UK government gave to the industry.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the subsidies, they are ridiculous. Like per year, meat gets 38 billion, and fruit and veg gets 17 million.
Yeah,
it makes no sense. Here are the health foods, which get like a little sprinkle. And farmers, they have it really tough. That's also a subject that people don't. Farmers are so disenfranchised that they go where the subsidies are. A lot of them, And in Slovenia, for instance, here, man, it's like cornfield after cornfield is popping up. 15 years ago, I was on a photo assignment and I was taking photos for Interspar of different animal agriculture people, and they had also these other farms. And one was explaining that he has to quit his whole family business and go into corn because he needs that for survival, because there are no buyers, and the system regulates the prices, right? So you as a farmer, you have no power unless you are gargantuous as a farm and living on these razor thin margins to survive, and usually with a lot of your production being just subsidized. And then when subsidies change, you change your farm. So these kind of things, I think that there's a lot of solutions already exist, but yeah, it's hard to pinpoint. what exactly is preventing actual change. We did, ban straws, and it's like 10 years now. We're like, congratulations, the straws, and everybody, like, out of all of the things, it's like, man, paper straws are not even a good solution environmentally.
So Vlad, it's been lovely talking to you. This is
Thank you. Likewise.
Been great and very informative.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor.